apparently they have did it. What do I mean by that? Did you know that Jiangshin, which of course we all know, it's an incubation project under Jasmy that's really focused on AI. Jiangshin just recently announced another partnership. Now, before I explain what this is, I first want to clarify nothing I say is financial advice, and I'm not telling anyone to do anything. However, did you know that Jiangshin recently made a post? They basically talk about how they have signed a memorandum of understanding, or should I say MOU, with a creative company called Void, but it's not spelled in the traditional way. It's spelled like V01D, but then it's called Void, right? But besides that point though, so basically through this collaboration, Jiangshin and Void, they're going to be working on, certain aspects in regard to, but not limited to, for instance, in the case of product feedback for the distributed rendering application, which is called like GPX LINK, okay, whatever that is. I've never heard of that. And then also they talk about the expansion of GPX to creative studios and creators. Okay, that's pretty cool. And then we take a look at also the development of new products and supporting creators in the AI era. I mean, all right, cool, right? Also on top of that, they say their goal is to make GPU infrastructure. GPU stands for graphic processing unit, by the way, but they say again, their goal is to make GPU infrastructure more than just computing power. That all sounds really cool. What will happen when it comes to the actual application and the actual execution? We'll have to wait and see. But I think it's kind of the thought that counts, right, when it comes to this, because a lot of people thought that Jiangshin, after it won that award from Sony and as well as that award from Google, they thought that, okay, Jiangshin doesn't really care anymore. And some people are fair to think that way because Jiangshin, it just doesn't really update much like Jasmy. But, seeing these updates, these, I guess, announcements here and there, I'm pretty happy to see that. And if I do see it, I think it kind of showcases effort. Now, have I ever heard about Void before? Or should I say in this case, V01D? Absolutely not. I've never heard of that. But you know what? Again, it's kind of like the thought that counts. It's like trying to mow your friend's lawn. It might not be the best, but it's kind of like the thought that counts. I mean, you can't really blame them, right? I mean, what can you do about it? But yeah, besides that point. When I take a look at Jasmy as of right now, people like to say, well, why does anything Jiangshin do? Why would that affect Jasmy? Well, it's because, again, Jiangshin is literally an incubation project under Jasmy. So if, let's say, something positive were to happen to it, I think it would, of course, in a sense, somewhat directly, or should I say indirectly, affect Jasmy in a kind of positive way. It's like, for instance, I'm just going to use this as an example. Does anyone know a project called Polkadot? Now, Polkadot has a canary network called Kusama. And what that basically means is that projects that wish to launch on Polkadot, they'll typically first start off with Kusama. They'll kind of test it out there, and then eventually, if it's all good to go, later on they move on to Polkadot. Now, inherently, because a lot of developers first start off with Kusama before later moving on to Polkadot, I think what that means is that inherently, again, if let's say Polkadot were to do good, I think Kusama kind of goes along with the ride. That's kind of my mindset, and vice versa, right? If Kusama does well, I think it also affects Polkadot. It's kind of no different here, in my opinion. I kind of view Jasmy as sort of the Polkadot, even though it isn't, but I'm just saying in terms of this analogy. But then I view kind of Jiangshin as the Kusama. There is a Batman, but there's also a Robin. That's my mindset. Jasmy's the Batman, Jiangshin, it's the Robin. Now, of course, Polkadot is a different project than Jasmy. Jasmy is really focused on data storage, whereas Polkadot is focused on connecting blockchains together. It's focused on something called interoperability. So it's a little bit different, but you know what? Tomato, tomato, right? It's just an analogy, just kind of an example. If Jasmy goes back to December of 2024, again, we're around 7 times lower than that. In which case, some people like to say, okay, why don't you look for a microcap? They asked me that question. But let's take this into consideration. Jasmy going back to where it once was in December of 2024, it's a 7x, right? Now, if all I'm looking for is that type of movement, even though it may never happen, I'm just saying, I'm only taking a look at the charts, right? I'm just saying how it is. But Jasmy is around 7 times lower than where it once was back in December 2024, but that's a 7x. Again, if we take a look at a lot of the projects out there in the top 200 and the top 300, many of them are around 7 times, 8 times, 9 times lower than where they once were a year or even the year before that. I don't need to be searching for that type of movement through a microcap. This is just my opinion. That's personally what I'm doing. I don't need to be looking for that through a microcap. For what? Now, if some people out there that I know and they like to post on social media and stuff like this that they're looking for like a 100,000% movement or whatever, then that type of stuff doesn't exist usually within the top 150 and stuff like that, right? But I'm not looking for that type of movement though. So I don't need to look for a microcap. That's my perspective. If a 7x is all I care about, I don't need to be looking at a microcap at all. That's just my perspective. But that's just kind of my mindset, right? But I don't want to believe in like, such a massive project, because if it recovers, what does it do? 30, 40%? I'm very bored at that point. But a microcap, it feels a little bit kind of scary to me. So I just look for a project that's kind of, somewhere in between, kind of that happy medium, I suppose. But that is just my perspective as of right now. I'm not telling anyone to do anything. We'll see what happens though, because Bitcoin is still at around 80 grand. Hasn't really done much, but we'll wait and see what happens. So I'm still staying patient, but there's really nothing else I can do beyond that. Now, I'd also like to mention this actually. This is in case a lot of people have been kind of questioning why Jasmy is focused on such a boring market. Let's take this into consideration. Did you know that according to something called Fortune Business Insights, they say that the global data storage market size could be worth nearly 800 billion by 2030. So that's pretty massive. And let's take this into consideration. Within this space, there's not that many projects out there that are really focused on data storage and yet are famous. Jasmy's most famous competitor is arguably Filecoin. Sure, there's Siacoin, there's Storj, or should I say storage? Some people call it Storj, some others call it storage, but besides that, there's also Arweave, for instance, but there isn't like so many. And for a market that can maybe become so massive moving forward within this space, there's just still not that many options. So what happens if there's not that many options? If the market sentiment were to come for, let's say, data storage within this space, if that attention were to come and that becomes a narrative, a big narrative, I should say, the attention is going to be more concentrated on the ones that actually are there, because there just simply isn't that many to begin with. So I think that, if anything, is a net positive when it comes to Jasmy. Sure, it's focused on kind of a boring market, some people like to say, but inherently, because of that, it doesn't have that many competitors. So, I mean, there's trade-offs to each aspect, right? Some other projects out there are focused on a very exciting niche, a very popular one, but a lot of competitors. Sure, they can make it big there, but just too many competitors. Or they could focus on a niche that's kind of boring, but inherently it doesn't have that much competition. So it depends. But in this case, Jasmy, it's more so on a calm, kind of a more boring niche, but it just doesn't have that much competition. However, I want to say thank you for watching, and I'll be sure to keep everyone updated if there is any more updates moving forward. So hopefully y'all stay tuned for that. It's been Lee the Captain. I'm out. Peace. Bye.